The wagon lurched to a bone-jarring halt, and Beatrice Grant clutched her carpetbag tighter as dust swirled through the canvas opening, coating everything in a fine layer of Montana grit. After 6 weeks of travel from Boston, she had finally arrived at what she hoped would be her new home, though her stomach twisted with nerves at the thought of meeting her future husband for the first time. "This is the McCready place, miss," the driver called back, his weathered face creased with uncertainty. "Leastways, I think it is. The directions got a bit muddled back in town." Beatrice climbed down from the wagon, her navy traveling dress already wrinkled beyond redemption. The ranch stretched before her under the endless Montana sky, a modest collection of buildings that spoke of hard work and simple living. Cattle dotted the distant hills, and the August sun beat down mercilessly on the dry earth. She had written to Samuel McCready through the mail-order bride agency 3 months ago, and his letters had been kind if somewhat stilted. He had described his ranch outside of St. Louis, Montana, a small but growing spread where he hoped to build a future with the right woman. The main house needed paint, but it looked sturdy enough. Beatrice took a deep breath and walked toward the porch, her heart hammering. Before she reached the steps, the door swung open and a man emerged who made her breath catch for entirely different reasons than nervousness. He was tall, well over 6 feet, with dark hair that curled slightly at his collar and eyes the color of spring grass. His shirt sleeves were rolled up, revealing forearms bronzed by the sun and corded with muscle. He could not have been much older than 26 or 27, she guessed, perhaps 8 years her senior, but the confusion on his handsome face was evident. "Can I help you, miss?" he asked, his voice a deep rumble that seemed to vibrate in her chest. "I am Beatrice Grant," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "I have come from Boston to marry Samuel McCready." The man's eyebrows shot up and something flickered across his face, too quick to read. "Samuel McCready? Yes, we have been corresponding for 3 months. He sent for me to become his wife." The cowboy descended the porch steps slowly, studying her with an intensity that made her skin warm. "Miss Grant, I think there has been a considerable mistake. This is the Lawson Ranch. The McCready place is about 5 miles north of here." Beatrice felt her cheeks flame with embarrassment. "Oh, I am so sorry. The driver said he thought this was the right place, but he seemed uncertain. I should have confirmed before imposing on you like this." "No imposition," the man said quickly. He glanced at the departing wagon, which was already disappearing down the dusty road. "Seems your driver did not wait around. I am Jackson Lawson, and you are more than welcome to rest here while I saddle up and take you to the McCready Ranch. I could not ask you to go to such trouble." "It is no trouble at all, Miss Grant. In fact, it would be my pleasure." He smiled then, a slow curve of his lips that transformed his face from merely handsome to absolutely devastating. "Please, come inside out of this heat. The ride to McCready's place will take about an hour, and you look like you could use some water and a chance to sit on something that is not moving." Beatrice hesitated, propriety warring with practicality. But the August sun was merciless, and her throat was parched from the dusty journey. "Thank you, Mr. Lawson. That is very kind." The interior of the house was surprisingly neat for a bachelor's home. The furniture was simple but well made, and everything had its place. Jackson gestured to a chair at the kitchen table and went to pump water into a tin cup. "How long were you traveling?" he asked, handing her the cup. 6 weeks from Boston," Beatrice said, drinking gratefully. The water was cool and sweet. The train to St. Louis, Missouri, then by riverboat and stage, and finally that dreadful wagon. That is quite a journey." Jackson leaned against the counter, crossing his arms. "You must be eager to finally meet Mr. McCready." Something in his tone made her look up sharply, but his expression was neutral. I am hopeful that we will suit each other well. His letters were very encouraging. I am sure they were. Jackson pushed off from the counter. Let me get my horse ready. Please make yourself comfortable. As he left, Beatrice set down the cup and tried to settle her nerves. This was not how she had imagined her arrival at all. She had pictured meeting Samuel on his porch, perhaps with a shy exchange of greetings before he showed her around the ranch that would become her home. Instead, she had blundered onto the wrong property entirely and met a man who made her pulse race in a way that Samuel's carefully penned letters never had. She stood and walked to the window, watching as Jackson led a magnificent bay horse from the barn. He moved with an easy confidence that spoke of a man comfortable in his own skin, completely at home in this wild country. Beatrice had grown up in the crowded streets of Boston, where her father had worked as a clerk until his death 2 years ago. Her mother had followed 6 months later, and suddenly, Beatrice had found herself alone at 18 with no family and few prospects. The boarding house where she had taken a room was expensive, and her meager wages from sewing could barely cover it. The mail-order bride agency had seemed like the answer to her prayers. A chance for a fresh start, a home of her own, a husband to build a life with. Samuel McCready had written of his ranch, his hopes for the future, his desire for a good woman to share it with. His letters had been kind and respectful, never presumptuous. She had allowed herself to hope. But now, looking at Jackson Lawson as he checked the saddle cinch, she felt a flutter of something she had not expected. Attraction, pure and simple, and utterly inappropriate given that she was here to marry another man. Jackson returned to the house, his hat in his hand. "All ready, Miss Grant. I am afraid you will have to ride with me. I do not have a buggy and it is too far to walk in this heat." "Of course," Beatrice said, though the thought of being that close to him made her heart skip. "I appreciate your help, Mr. Lawson." "Jackson, please, we are not much for formality out here." "Then you must call me Beatrice." His smile returned, warming those green eyes. "Beatrice it is." He helped her onto the horse first, then swung up behind her with effortless grace. His arm came around her waist to hold the reins, and Beatrice was suddenly very aware of the solid warmth of his chest against her back, the strength in the arm that steadied her. She caught the scent of him, leather and soap and something indefinably masculine that made her head swim. "Comfortable?" His voice rumbled near her ear. "Yes, thank you," she managed, though comfortable was not exactly the word she would have chosen. Flustered, perhaps. Overwhelmed. Unexpectedly thrilled. They set off at an easy pace, the horse's gait smooth beneath them. The Montana landscape rolled past, vast and beautiful in its starkness. Mountains rose in the distance, their peaks still touched with snow even in late summer. The sky seemed impossibly wide after the narrow streets of Boston. "It is beautiful here," Beatrice said softly. "It is," Jackson agreed. "Hard country but honest. It does not pretend to be anything other than what it is." "Is that why you came here?" She felt him shrug behind her. "I was born in Kansas, moved here with my father when I was 15. He wanted to ranch, thought Montana had good grazing land. He was right about that." He died 3 years ago, threw from a horse, broke his neck. Quick at least. His voice was matter-of-fact, but she heard the old grief beneath it. "I am sorry. I lost both my parents in the past 2 years. His arm tightened slightly around her waist, a gesture of comfort. "Then you understand, it is hard being alone." "Yes," Beatrice whispered, "it is." They rode in companionable silence for a while. Despite the circumstances, despite the strangeness of the situation, Beatrice felt oddly at peace. There was something about Jackson that made her feel safe, as though she could trust him completely even though they had only just met. "So you have been corresponding with Samuel McCready," Jackson said eventually, and again there was that odd note in his voice. Yes, he seemed like a good man from his letters. Hardworking, honest. Oh, he is all that, Jackson said. Known Samuel for about 5 years now. He is a decent enough fellow. You do not sound entirely convinced. Jackson was quiet for a long moment. It is not my place to speak ill of a man, especially to his intended bride. Samuel is hardworking and honest, like you said. He is also 43 years old, set in his ways, and has a temper when things do not go according to his plans. Beatrice felt a chill despite the heat. He told me he was 35. Did he now? Jackson's voice had gone flat. That is interesting. Perhaps you are mistaken about his age. Perhaps, Jackson said, but she could tell he did not believe it any more than she did. They crested a rise, and Jackson pointed to a collection of buildings in the distance. That is the McCready Ranch. Beatrice's stomach knotted with anxiety. The ranch looked prosperous, larger than Jackson's spread, with a big barn and several outbuildings. But Samuel had lied to her about his age. What else might he have lied about? As they drew closer, a figure emerged from the barn. He was stocky and gray-haired, his face weathered by years in the sun. He looked every one of his 43 years, possibly more. His eyes narrowed as he watched them approach. Jackson brought the horse to a stop in front of the house, but did not immediately dismount. Beatrice felt him hesitate, his arm still around her waist. "McCready," Jackson called out. "Found this young lady at my place. Seems the wagon driver got confused about which ranch was which." Samuel McCready walked closer, his gaze raking over Beatrice in a way that made her skin crawl. "Miss Grant, I presume?" "Yes, Mr. McCready, I apologize for the confusion. No matter, you are here now." He reached up as if to help her down, but Jackson shifted, keeping her on the horse. "Before the lady dismounts, McCready, maybe you want to explain why you told her you were 35, when we both know you just celebrated your 44th birthday last month." Samuel's face reddened. "That is between me and my intended bride, Lawson. It is none of your concern." "It became my concern when she showed up at my door," Jackson said, his voice hard. "What else did you lie to her about? The state of your ranch, your prospects, whether you already have a wife." "I have never been married, and you damn well know it," Samuel snapped. "Now hand over my bride before I take offense at your interference." Beatrice felt Jackson's arm tighten protectively around her. "The lady can speak for herself. Beatrice, do you want to get down?" She looked at Samuel McCready, really looked at him. His face was hard, his eyes cold. There was no kindness there, no warmth. She thought of his letters, filled with flowery language about building a life together, and realized they had all been lies. Not just the age, but the entire picture he had painted of himself. "I am not sure," she said honestly. "Not sure." Samuel's voice rose. "You came all this way to marry me, and now you are not sure. I paid good money to that agency to find me a wife. I am not cattle to be purchased, Mr. McCready. No, but you did agree to come here and marry me. You gave your word." Jackson spoke before Beatrice could respond. "A contract based on lies is not valid, McCready. You misrepresented yourself. The lady has every right to change her mind." "Stay out of this, Lawson. This does not concern you. Actually, it does." Jackson's voice was calm but unmistakably threatening. "Because Beatrice is under my protection now, and I say she does not have to do anything she does not want to do." Beatrice twisted to look at Jackson, startled. His green eyes met hers, and she saw determination there, along with something else that made her breath catch. He gave her the slightest nod, a silent promise that he would keep her safe no matter what she decided. She turned back to Samuel. "I would like some time to think, Mr. McCready. This has all happened very quickly, and I have just discovered that you were not entirely truthful with me. Surely you can understand my hesitation." Samuel's jaw worked, and for a moment she thought he would refuse. But Jackson's presence behind her, solid and unmovable, seemed to give him pause. "Fine. Think all you want. But you are staying here under my roof while you think about it. That is only proper." "She will stay at my ranch," Jackson said immediately. "With proper chaperonage, of course. My neighbor, Mrs. Henderson, is a widow who lives just over the property line. She will be more than happy to stay with Beatrice and ensure everything is above reproach. You cannot just steal my bride, Lawson." "I am not stealing anyone. I am offering Beatrice a safe place to stay while she makes up her mind. If she decides to marry you after all, I will personally escort her back here with Mrs. Henderson as witness. But she is not staying under your roof when she is uncertain. That would not be proper at all." Samuel looked like he wanted to argue further, but something in Jackson's expression stopped him. "1 week," he said finally. "She has 1 week to make up her mind. After that, I am going to that agency and demanding they send me a new bride, one who will honor her commitments." "That seems fair," Jackson said, though Beatrice heard the steel in his voice. "Beatrice, are you agreeable to staying at my ranch with Mrs. Henderson while you consider your options?" What were her options, really? She had no money to return to Boston, and even if she did, there was nothing there for her. She could marry Samuel McCready, a man who had already proven himself dishonest and whose eyes held no warmth, or she could accept Jackson's offer of time and space to think. "Yes," she said quietly. "Thank you, Jackson. That is very kind." Jackson wheeled the horse around without another word, and they headed back the way they had come. Beatrice felt Samuel's angry gaze boring into her back until they crested the rise and left the McCready ranch behind. "Thank you for that," she said once they were out of earshot. "You did not have to intervene." "Yes, I did," Jackson said simply. "I could not leave you there with him, not when you looked so uncertain, and not when he had lied to you from the start. I feel like such a fool. I should have asked more questions, requested references perhaps. You trusted him to be honest. That does not make you a fool, Beatrice. That makes you a decent person. It makes him a liar." They rode in silence for a while, Beatrice's mind spinning. She had come so far, invested so much hope in this new life, and it had all fallen apart within hours of her arrival. What was she going to do? "I know this is not how you imagined things would go," Jackson said softly, "but I promise you we will figure something out. You are not alone in this." His words, combined with the gentle strength of his arm around her waist, brought unexpected tears to Beatrice's eyes. She blinked them back fiercely. She had not cried when her mother died, had not let herself break down through all the lonely months that followed. She would not start now. But Jackson must have felt her shoulders shake because he pulled the horse to a stop and turned her gently to face him. His hands cupped her face, his thumbs brushing away the tears she had tried to hide. "It is all right to cry," he said. "You have been through a lot today." "I do not cry," she said stubbornly, even as more tears spilled over. "Well, you are doing a fine job of it now." His smile was gentle, understanding. "Let it out, Beatrice. There is no shame in it, so she did." She cried for her lost parents, for the life she had left behind, for the future she had imagined that had crumbled to dust. She cried for her fear and uncertainty, and Jackson held her through it all, his arms strong and sure around her, murmuring soft words of comfort. When the storm finally passed, Beatrice pulled back, mortified. "I am so sorry. I have completely ruined your shirt." Jackson glanced down at the wet spot on his shoulder and shrugged. "It will dry, feel better." Surprisingly, she did. "A little. Thank you for not thinking me foolish." "I could never think you foolish." His green eyes searched hers. "You are brave, Beatrice Grant, braver than you know. Coming all this way alone, trusting in a future you could not see, that takes real courage. No one had ever called her brave before. The word warmed something deep inside her that had been cold for a very long time. They reached Jackson's ranch as the sun was beginning its descent toward the mountains. He helped her down from the horse, his hands lingering at her waist perhaps a moment longer than necessary. "Let me settle the horse, and then I will ride over to fetch Mrs. Henderson," he said. "Make yourself at home. There is food in the kitchen if you are hungry." While Jackson was in the barn, Beatrice explored the house more thoroughly. It was clearly a bachelor's domain, but Jackson kept it remarkably clean. The furniture was sturdy and well made, most of it handcrafted by the look of it. Books lined a shelf near the fireplace, an eclectic collection ranging from agricultural manuals to poetry. She pulled out a worn volume of Tennyson and smiled. A cowboy who read poetry. She was replacing the book when Jackson returned. "Mrs. Henderson will be here within the hour. She is delighted to have female company. Her husband died 2 years ago, and she gets lonely in that house by herself." "I do not want to be a burden to anyone." "You are not a burden, Beatrice. You are a guest, and out here we take care of our own." He hesitated, then added, "Besides, I find I am already quite fond of your company." The admission hung in the air between them, weighted with possibility. Beatrice felt her cheeks warm, but she met his gaze steadily. "I am fond of yours as well, Jackson, which makes this situation even more complicated." "Does it have to be complicated?" He took a step closer. "You came here looking for a husband for a new life. What if you simply found those things in a different place than you expected?" Her heart hammered. "We only met this morning. I know, and maybe I am crazy for saying this, but from the moment you stepped down from that wagon, something in me just knew." He reached out, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "I look at you and I think there she is, the one I have been waiting for. Jackson, I do not even know you. Then get to know me. That is what this week is for, is it not? Take the time to learn who I am, what I want, what kind of man I would be to you. And I will learn the same about you. At the end of the week, if you decide you want to go back to McCready, I will take you there myself and wish you well. But if you decide you might want something different, well, I will be right here." It was insane. Impossible. They were strangers. But when Beatrice looked into Jackson's eyes, she did not see a stranger. She saw honesty and strength, kindness and humor. She saw a possibility. "All right," she said softly. "1 week. But Jackson, I need you to understand something I will not be trifled with. If this is just some passing fancy, some game to you, tell me now." His expression turned serious. "This is no game, Beatrice. I have never been more serious about anything in my life. You are here, you walked onto my land, and every instinct I have is screaming that you are meant to be here. Looks like you are mine now if you will have me." Before she could respond, the sound of an approaching wagon interrupted them. Jackson stepped back, giving her space, but his eyes held a promise that made her pulse race. Mrs. Henderson turned out to be a plump woman in her early 50s with kind eyes and a no-nonsense manner. She took in the situation with a knowing look, but did not pry, simply accepting Jackson's explanation that Beatrice needed a place to stay while she sorted out her plans. "Of course, dear," Mrs. Henderson said, patting Beatrice's hand. "We will make you right comfortable here. Jackson, you have been keeping this place tidy. Your father would be proud." "Thank you, Mrs. Henderson. I appreciate you coming on such short notice." "Nonsense, I am happy to help." She turned to Beatrice. "Now you must be exhausted after your journey. Why do not you rest while I make us all some supper?" Beatrice wanted to protest that she could help, but the truth was she was exhausted. The emotions of the day had drained her completely. Jackson showed her to a small bedroom that had clearly been his father's, judging by the masculine furnishings. "I will sleep in the barn," he said. "Mrs. Henderson can have my room and you can stay here. Everything is clean, I promise." "Jackson, I cannot put you out of your own house." "You are not putting me out. I have slept in that barn plenty of times, probably more comfortable than half the hotel beds I have been in." He smiled. "Rest, Beatrice. We will talk more at supper." Beatrice removed her traveling dress and lay down on the bed in her chemise and petticoat. She meant to just close her eyes for a moment, but exhaustion pulled her under almost immediately. She woke to the smell of cooking meat and fresh bread. The light outside had shifted to the golden glow of early evening. For a moment, she could not remember where she was, and then the events of the day came rushing back. She had been sent to the wrong ranch. She had met Jackson Lawson. Samuel McCready had lied to her, and Jackson had offered her a choice, a chance at something different. Beatrice quickly dressed and tidied her hair before joining the others in the kitchen. Mrs. Henderson had worked wonders with Jackson's supplies, creating a hearty meal of beef stew and fresh biscuits. Jackson had cleaned up and changed his shirt, his hair damp from washing. They sat around the table together, and for the first time in years, Beatrice felt like she was part of a family. Mrs. Henderson regaled them with stories of the area, filling in the details of life in this part of Montana. She spoke of harsh winters and bountiful summers, of neighbors who looked out for each other, of the challenges and rewards of frontier life. "It is not an easy life," she said honestly, "but it is a good one if you have the right person to share it with. My Henry and I had 40 good years together. I would not trade a single day of it, even the hard ones." After supper, Mrs. Henderson shooed Beatrice and Jackson out of the kitchen, insisting she would handle the cleanup. They walked out onto the porch together, watching the sun paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. "Tell me about yourself," Jackson said, leaning against the porch rail. "The real you, not what you wrote in letters to McCready." Beatrice settled into a chair, gathering her thoughts. "I grew up in Boston. My father was a clerk, my mother took in sewing. We were not wealthy, but we were comfortable. I had a happy childhood, I think. My parents loved each other very much, and they loved me. No siblings, a brother older, Thomas. He died of scarlet fever when I was 10. It nearly destroyed my mother." Beatrice looked out at the darkening landscape. "When my father died 2 years ago, it was like she just gave up. She followed him 6 months later. The doctor said it was pneumonia, but I think it was a broken heart." Jackson's hand found hers in the darkness, his fingers lacing with hers. "And then you were alone." "Yes. I tried to make a go of it in Boston, but everything was so expensive. I was working 12-hour days sewing and could barely afford my room. When I saw the advertisement for the mail-order bride agency, it seemed like a sign, a chance to start over, to have a home again." "You wanted a family." "Yes," she admitted. "I wanted what my parents had, that partnership, that love. I thought maybe Samuel could give me that." "He could not," Jackson said firmly. "Even if he had been honest about his age, there was no love in that man. I saw the way he looked at you, like you were property he had purchased. That is not what you deserve, Beatrice." "What do I deserve?" Jackson turned to face her fully, his green eyes intense in the fading light. "You deserve someone who will cherish you, someone who will be honest with you even when the truth is hard, someone who will work beside you to build a life together, who will respect your thoughts and opinions. Someone who will look at you every day and thank God you chose him." "Is that how you would treat me?" The question came out barely above a whisper. "Yes," Jackson said simply. "That is exactly how I would treat you, because, Beatrice, I meant what I said earlier. I know it is fast, I know it seems impossible, but I cannot shake the feeling that you were meant to end up here, with me." Beatrice stood, moving to the porch rail beside him. "I feel it too," she confessed, "and it terrifies me. I came here to marry a man I had never met, and now I am considering marrying a different man I have known for less than a day. It is madness." "Maybe," Jackson agreed, "or maybe it is just how things were supposed to happen. My father used to say that life has a way of working out the way it is meant to, even when we think we have other plans." "What was he like, your father? Strong, fair?" "He loved this land, loved ranching. He taught me everything I know about horses and cattle, about reading the weather and understanding the land. But he also taught me to read, to think, to question things. He wanted me to have choices, to be more than just a rancher if I wanted. But you chose to be a rancher." "I did. Because I love it the same way he did. There is something about working with the land, with the animals, something real and honest about it. At the end of the day, you can see what you have accomplished. You can look at your herd and your fields and know that you built something." Beatrice could hear the passion in his voice, and it stirred something in her. "Tell me what a day is like here. What would my life be like if I stayed?" Jackson launched into a detailed description of ranch life. The early mornings checking on the cattle, the endless work of maintaining fences and buildings, the seasonal rhythms of calving and branding and selling stock. He spoke of long winters when the snow piled high and they had to break ice on the water troughs every morning. He told her about the spring roundup, the summer heat, the golden autumns. "It is not glamorous," he said honestly. "It is hard work, sunrise to sunset most days, but it is satisfying work, and it would not just be me doing it. If you stayed, you would be my partner in this. I would value your input on decisions. This would be our ranch, our life together." "What about a house? Would we live here?" "For now, yes. But I have been saving money to expand. I could add rooms, make it bigger. Maybe put in a proper parlor, expand the kitchen. Whatever you would want, we could do together." They talked late into the night, their conversation ranging from the practical to the personal. Jackson told her about his mother, who had died giving birth to a stillborn daughter when he was 8. He spoke of his loneliness after his father died, of throwing himself into work to avoid the empty silence of the house. Beatrice shared more about her life in Boston, the friends she had left behind, her love of reading and learning. Jackson seemed genuinely interested in her opinions about everything from politics to poetry, a stark contrast to how she imagined life with Samuel McCready would have been. Finally, Mrs. Henderson appeared in the doorway. "It is getting late, and you young people need your rest. Come along, Beatrice. Jackson, off to the barn with you." They said their good nights reluctantly. As Beatrice prepared for bed, she found herself smiling despite the strangeness of her situation. One day. She had known Jackson Lawson for one day, and already she could feel herself falling. The week passed in a blur of discovery and deepening feelings. Each morning, Beatrice would wake to the sound of Jackson working outside, and after breakfast with Mrs. Henderson, she would join him in his daily tasks. He taught her about the ranch, letting her help with the smaller chores while he handled the heavier work. She learned to collect eggs from the chickens without getting pecked, to tell when a fence post needed replacing, to read the sky for coming weather. Jackson was a patient teacher, never making her feel foolish for her ignorance about ranch life. Instead, he seemed to delight in showing her his world. In the evenings, they would sit on the porch and talk. Sometimes Mrs. Henderson joined them, sometimes she tactfully found reasons to be elsewhere. Jackson told Beatrice about his dreams for the ranch, about wanting to build something lasting that he could pass down to his children someday. Beatrice shared her own hopes, her desire for a real home, for love and family. On the third day, Jackson took her riding. He had a gentle mare named Daisy that he said would be perfect for her to learn on. Beatrice had never ridden before, and the first few minutes were terrifying as she tried to find her balance. But Jackson stayed right beside her, his voice calm and encouraging, and gradually she began to relax. They rode out to a high meadow where wildflowers bloomed in riotous color. Jackson spread a blanket, and they shared a simple lunch of bread and cheese while the horses grazed nearby. "This is my favorite spot on the whole ranch," Jackson said, lying back on the blanket to look at the sky. "When things get hard, when I am frustrated or tired, I come up here. It reminds me why I do this, why I stay." Beatrice lay beside him, their shoulders touching. "It is beautiful." "Yes, it is." But when she turned her head, he was not looking at the view. He was looking at her. Her breath caught. They had been careful all week, maintaining a proper distance even as the attraction between them grew stronger. But here, alone in this meadow with only the mountains as witness, that distance seemed impossible to maintain. "Beatrice," Jackson said softly, propping himself up on one elbow to look down at her. "May I kiss you?" She should say no. She was still technically promised to Samuel McCready, but her heart had already made its choice. "Yes." He kissed her slowly, tenderly, as though she were something precious. His lips were warm against hers, and Beatrice felt a jolt of electricity run through her entire body. She had never been kissed before, and now she understood what all the poetry was about. This feeling of connection, of rightness, of coming home. When they finally pulled apart, Jackson rested his forehead against hers. "I am in love with you," he said quietly. "I know it is too soon, I know I should wait, but I cannot keep it to myself anymore. I love you, Beatrice Grant, and I want to spend the rest of my life making you happy." Tears sprang to her eyes, but these were tears of joy. "I love you too, Jackson. I think I started falling the moment I saw you on that porch." He kissed her again, deeper this time, and Beatrice lost herself in the sensation. When they finally made their way back to the ranch, her lips were tender and her heart was singing. That night, she told Mrs. Henderson about her decision. The older woman smiled knowingly. "I thought you might. I have seen the way you two look at each other. It reminds me of Henry and me when we were young. Is it wrong to break my promise to Mr. McCready? Child, he broke the promise first when he lied to you. You owe him nothing. Besides, I know Jackson Lawson. He is a good man, honest and hardworking. He will take care of you." "I want to take care of him too," Beatrice said. "I want to be his partner to build this life together. Then that is what you will do." Mrs. Henderson patted her hand. "Now we should start thinking about a wedding. Nothing too fancy, I imagine, but we will want to do it properly." The next morning, Jackson and Beatrice rode to the McCready ranch together. Samuel was working near the barn, and his expression darkened when he saw them approaching. "Come to your senses, have you?" he called out. Beatrice dismounted, and Jackson stayed close beside her. "Mr. McCready, I have thought very carefully about your proposal, and I must respectfully decline. I cannot marry a man who began our relationship with dishonesty." Samuel's face reddened. "You are making a mistake, Missy. You will not find better than what I am offering." "I already have," Beatrice said firmly. "I am going to marry Jackson if he will have me." "Oh, I will have you," Jackson said, unable to keep the grin off his face. "Just as soon as we can arrange it." Samuel looked between them, his expression ugly. "You planned this, Lawson. You stole my bride right from under my nose." "I did not steal anyone," Jackson said calmly. "Beatrice made her own choice. She is not property, McCready. She is a woman with her own mind and her own heart, and she has decided she does not want to marry you. Accept it gracefully." For a moment, Beatrice thought Samuel might try to fight. His hands clenched into fists, and he took a step toward them. But Jackson simply stood his ground, calm and unafraid, and eventually Samuel backed down. "Fine," he spat. "Take her. I will write to the agency for a new bride, one who will honor her commitments. I hope you will be honest with her about your age and circumstances, Beatrice said quietly. She deserves that much. They left Samuel standing in his yard and rode back to Jackson's ranch. The moment they were out of sight, Jackson let out a whoop of joy and pulled Beatrice closer against him. You chose me, he said, wonder in his voice. You really chose me. Of course I chose you, Beatrice said, laughing. How could I not? You are everything I dreamed of and more. They were married 2 weeks later in a simple ceremony at the small church in St. Louis, Montana. Mrs. Henderson stood as witness, along with a few of Jackson's neighbors who had become Beatrice's friends as well. The preacher was a circuit rider who happened to be passing through, and he pronounced them husband and wife with genuine warmth. Beatrice wore a simple dress that Mrs. Henderson had helped her alter from her best Sunday gown. Jackson wore his cleanest shirt and actually looked nervous for the first time since she had met him. When he slipped the plain gold band onto her finger, his hand trembled slightly. I love you, he whispered as the preacher declared them married. I will love you every day for the rest of my life. And I love you, Beatrice whispered back. Their wedding night was tender and sweet. Jackson was patient with her inexperience, taking his time to make sure she felt cherished and safe. Beatrice had heard horror stories from some of the married women in Boston, tales of pain and duty and wifely obligation. But with Jackson, it was nothing like that. He made her feel beautiful and desired, and when he finally made her his wife in truth, it was with gentleness and passion in equal measure. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the darkness, Jackson's arm around her waist, Beatrice's head on his chest. Happy? He asked softly. Happier than I ever imagined possible, she said honestly. Jackson, I came here expecting a new life, but I never dreamed it could be this good. This is just the beginning, he promised. We have a whole lifetime ahead of us, Beatrice. A lifetime of building this ranch together, of making a family, of growing old side by side. That sounds perfect. They fell asleep wrapped in each other's arms, and Beatrice dreamed of the future they would build together. The first year of their marriage was a time of adjustment and growth. Beatrice threw herself into learning everything she could about ranch life. She proved to have a natural affinity for the chickens and the kitchen garden, and she took over managing the household accounts with an efficiency that impressed Jackson. She also began to understand the rhythms of their new life together. The early mornings when Jackson would kiss her goodbye before heading out to check the herd. The late afternoons when she would bring him water and they would steal a few moments together. The evenings when they would sit on the porch and plan for the future. Jackson was true to his word about making her a partner. He consulted her on every major decision, valued her input, and never made her feel less than equal. When they decided to buy more cattle, it was a discussion, not a decree. When they planned the expansion to the house, he listened carefully to what she wanted and incorporated her ideas. The house expansion began that spring. Jackson hired a carpenter from town, and together they added 2 bedrooms and a proper parlor. Beatrice chose curtains and helped paint the walls, transforming the bachelor house into a real home. She also started making friends among the other ranch wives in the area. Mrs. Henderson remained a close confidante, but Beatrice also grew close to Sarah Porter, whose husband ran cattle on the adjacent property, and Mary Chen, whose family had a small farm about 10 miles south. The women would gather once a month for quilting and conversation, and Beatrice treasured those afternoons of female companionship. By their first anniversary, Beatrice suspected she might be pregnant. She waited another month to be sure before telling Jackson, wanting to surprise him with the news on a perfect evening. She made his favorite meal, pot roast with all the fixings, and wore her prettiest dress. Jackson noticed immediately that something was different. "You look beautiful," he said, kissing her at the door. "What is the occasion? Can't a wife want to look nice for her husband? Of course, but you are practically glowing. Is there something you want to tell me?" Beatrice could not keep the secret any longer. "We are going to have a baby," she said, watching his face light up with joy. "In about 6 months, if my calculations are correct." Jackson let out a whoop and swept her up in his arms, spinning her around until she was dizzy with laughter. "A baby! We are going to have a baby!" He set her down gently, his hands immediately going to her still flat stomach. "Are you well? Do you need anything? Should you be resting?" "I am fine," Beatrice assured him, touched by his concern. "The doctor in town confirmed it. He says I am healthy and strong, and there is no reason to think anything will go wrong." Jackson pulled her close, his voice thick with emotion. "You have made me the happiest man alive, Beatrice. First you agreed to marry me, and now you are giving me a child. How did I get so lucky?" "I am the lucky one," Beatrice said, resting her head against his chest. "A year ago, I thought I was going to marry a stranger who had lied to me. Instead, I found you. I found love and a home and a future I never dared dream of. That wagon driver did us both a favor, delivering you to the wrong ranch." Beatrice laughed. "The best mistake ever made." The pregnancy progressed smoothly. Beatrice had some morning sickness in the early months, but Jackson was attentive and supportive, bringing her crackers before she even got out of bed and taking over some of her usual chores without complaint. As her belly grew, Jackson became almost comically protective. He would not let her lift anything heavy, insisted she rest frequently, and worried constantly about her health. Beatrice found his concern endearing, even when it became a bit excessive. "I am pregnant, not dying," she would remind him gently. "Women have been doing this since the beginning of time." "Not my woman," he would respond stubbornly. "Not carrying my child. I am going to take care of you whether you like it or not." Their son was born on a cold February morning in 1885. The labor was long and difficult, and there were moments when Jackson, pacing outside the bedroom while Mrs. Henderson and the doctor attended to Beatrice, thought he might lose his mind with worry. But finally, he heard the strong cry of an infant, and Mrs. Henderson emerged with a smile on her face. "You have a son, Jackson. A big, healthy boy, and Beatrice is fine, just tired." Jackson rushed into the room to find his wife propped up against the pillows, sweaty and exhausted but radiating joy. In her arms was a red-faced infant with a shock of dark hair. "Meet your son," Beatrice said softly as Jackson approached. "I thought we could name him James after your father." Jackson looked down at the tiny face, already so perfect, so precious. His son. His and Beatrice's son. Love crashed over him in a wave so powerful it brought tears to his eyes. "James Lawson," he said, testing the name. "It is perfect. He is perfect." He leaned down to kiss Beatrice's forehead. "You are perfect. Thank you for this gift, my love." "He has your eyes," Beatrice said, though in truth it was hard to tell what color the baby's eyes were yet. "Or he will, I think." Jackson sat carefully on the edge of the bed, one arm around his wife, staring in wonder at his son. "I cannot believe he is real, that he is ours." "Believe it," Beatrice said with a tired smile, "and get ready for many sleepless nights." She was right about that. James proved to be a fussy baby, prone to crying in the middle of the night for no apparent reason, but Jackson never complained. He would walk the floor with his son, singing old cowboy songs until the baby finally settled. Beatrice would watch from the bed, her heart swelling with love for this man who had become such a devoted father. As James grew, his personality emerged. He was curious and active, always getting into things. By the time he was 2, he was following Jackson around the ranch like a small shadow, wanting to help with everything. Jackson had infinite patience with him, explaining what he was doing and why, letting James help, even when it would have been faster to do things alone. When James was 3, Beatrice discovered she was pregnant again. This time, the pregnancy was easier, as though her body remembered what to do. Jackson was just as protective, but Beatrice had learned how to manage his worrying while still taking care of herself. Their daughter was born on a beautiful summer evening in 1888. The labor was quicker this time, and soon Beatrice was holding a tiny girl with wispy blonde hair and blue eyes. "She looks like you," Jackson said with wonder, gently touching the baby's soft cheek. "She is beautiful, just like her mother." "What should we call her?" Beatrice asked. They had discussed names but had not settled on one. "What about Grace? For the grace that brought you into my life." Beatrice felt tears prick her eyes. "Grace Lawson. I love it." James was fascinated by his new sister, wanting to hold her constantly. Jackson and Beatrice supervised carefully, teaching him how to support her head, how to be gentle. It was clear from the start that he would be a protective older brother. The years that followed were full and happy. The ranch prospered under Jackson's careful management and Beatrice's shrewd business sense. They expanded their herd, improved their buildings, and became respected members of the community. Beatrice threw herself into motherhood while still maintaining her role as Jackson's partner in the ranch. She kept the books, managed the household, raised their children, and somehow found time to help with the cattle when needed. She was stronger than she had ever been in Boston, her hands calloused from work, her skin tanned by the Montana sun. Jackson continued to be everything she had dreamed of in a husband. He was loving and attentive, never taking her for granted. He still brought her wildflowers from the high meadow where he had first kissed her. He still told her he loved her every single day. And he was a wonderful father, patient and kind, teaching their children to love the land and respect all living things. When James was 6 and Grace was 3, Beatrice found herself pregnant once more. This pregnancy was the hardest yet, with more fatigue and sickness than the previous 2. Jackson insisted she rest more, taking over even more of the household tasks and enlisting James to help with small chores. Their second son was born on a crisp autumn day in 1891. He came quickly, much to the doctor's surprise, and announced his arrival with a lusty cry that could probably be heard all the way to town. "He has a good set of lungs," the doctor said with a laugh. "What will you name this one?" Beatrice looked at Jackson, who was cradling the baby with the same wonder he had shown with James and Grace. "What about Samuel?" she suggested softly. Jackson looked at her in surprise. "After McCready?" "No, after the man I thought I was going to marry, the one who led me to you instead. If it had not been for that mistake, I would never have found my way to the right ranch to you. Samuel can be a reminder that sometimes the wrong path leads us exactly where we are meant to be." Jackson's eyes grew misty. "Samuel Lawson it is. Though I hope he has better character than his namesake. With you as his father, I have no doubt he will." Life settled into a comfortable rhythm. James grew tall and strong, already showing signs of becoming a skilled rancher like his father. Grace was sweet and bright, with a gift for growing things that made the garden flourish. Little Samuel was fearless and adventurous, keeping his parents on their toes. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Jackson surprised Beatrice with a trip to the high meadow. Mrs. Henderson, now in her 60s but still spry, agreed to watch the children for the afternoon. Jackson packed a picnic and they rode out together, just as they had done so many times before. The meadow was just as beautiful as Beatrice remembered, carpeted with late summer flowers. They spread their blanket and Jackson produced a small box from his pocket. "What is this?" Beatrice asked, accepting the box with curiosity. "Open it." Inside was a delicate gold locket. Beatrice opened it to find tiny photographs of their 3 children on one side and a picture of her and Jackson on the other. "It is beautiful," she breathed. "When did you have this made?" "I sent away for it months ago. I wanted to give you something special for our anniversary, something that represents everything you have given me." He helped her fasten it around her neck. 10 years ago, you walked onto my ranch by mistake and changed my life forever. You have given me love, children, a home, a future. You have made every day better just by being in it." Beatrice felt tears streaming down her cheeks. "I love you so much, Jackson. When I think about how close I came to marrying Samuel McCready instead of you, it terrifies me. What if the wagon driver had not made that mistake? What if I had never met you?" "But you did meet me," Jackson said, pulling her close. "And I like to think that even if that driver had taken you straight to McCready's ranch, we would have found our way to each other somehow. You were meant to be mine, Beatrice. I knew it the moment I saw you, and I know it even more certainly now." He kissed her there in the meadow, with the same passion and tenderness he had shown on their wedding night. They made love under the vast Montana sky, celebrating 10 years of marriage and a lifetime still to come. As the children grew older, they each found their place in the family and on the ranch. James developed a real talent for working with horses, training them with the same patience his father had shown. By the time he was 15, ranchers from all over the territory were bringing their horses to the Lawson Ranch for James to train. Grace discovered a love of learning that rivaled her mother's. Beatrice taught her to read and write, and soon Grace was devouring every book she could get her hands on. When she turned 14, Beatrice and Jackson arranged for her to attend a proper school in town, boarding with the teacher during the week and coming home on weekends. Samuel, true to his adventurous nature, was constantly exploring the ranch and the surrounding countryside. He had a gift for tracking and could read signs in the dirt that even his father sometimes missed. Jackson predicted he would make an excellent scout or guide someday. The years passed in a blur of seasons, each bringing its own joys and challenges. There were hard winters when the cattle suffered, and they worried about making it through. There were droughts that tested their resolve and their resources. But there were also years of plenty, of good beef prices and successful calving seasons. Through it all, Beatrice and Jackson faced everything together. They had built more than a ranch in their years together. They had built a life, a family, a legacy. And their love, which had begun with a mistake and a cowboy's bold claim, only grew stronger with each passing year. When James was 20, he married a sweet girl named Elizabeth, whose family had a ranch on the other side of St. Louis. The wedding was a joyous affair, with half the territory turning out to celebrate. Beatrice cried happy tears as she watched her son pledge his life to his bride, remembering her own wedding day and how uncertain she had been about the future. "He is happy," Jackson said, his arm around her waist as they watched James and Elizabeth dance. "We raised a good man." "We did," Beatrice agreed. "He is so much like you, kind and strong and honest." "He is like both of us," Jackson corrected. "He has your intelligence and your determination." Elizabeth is a lucky woman. Within a year, James and Elizabeth had given them their first grandchild, a beautiful baby girl they named Beatrice after her grandmother. Holding her tiny namesake, Beatrice marveled at how life came full circle. She had come to Montana looking for a future and had found more than she ever could have imagined. Grace, after finishing school, surprised everyone by announcing her intention to become a teacher. She moved back to St. Louis and took a position at the schoolhouse, boarding with the same teacher who had once instructed her. She was a natural educator, patient and creative, and her students adored her. Samuel, at 18, took a job as a guide for hunters and explorers wanting to see the Montana wilderness. He would disappear for weeks at a time, returning with stories of grizzly bears and mountain peaks and vast forests. Beatrice worried about him constantly, but Jackson reminded her that their son needed to find his own path. On their 20th anniversary, Jackson took Beatrice back to the meadow once more. They were both older now, with lines on their faces and gray threading through their hair. But the love between them was as fresh and strong as it had been on their wedding day. 20 years, Beatrice said, leaning against Jackson's chest as they watched the sunset paint the sky. Sometimes it feels like yesterday that I stepped off that wagon at your ranch. Other times, it feels like I have always been here, like there was never a time when I did not love you. I know exactly what you mean, Jackson said. You are part of me now, Beatrice, part of my heart, my soul, my very being. I cannot imagine life without you. You will never have to, she promised. We will grow old together, you and I, watching our children and grandchildren build their own lives. And when we are ancient and gray, sitting on that porch in our rocking chairs, we will still remember that perfect moment when a wagon driver made a mistake and brought me to the right ranch after all. Jackson turned her in his arms, looking down at her with all the love of 2 decades together shining in his green eyes. Looks like you are mine now, he said, echoing the words he had spoken so long ago. And you always will be. Always, Beatrice agreed, rising on her toes to kiss him. For all the rest of our days. The years continued to unfold in a tapestry of joy and sorrow, triumph and challenge. Grace eventually married a banker from town, a quiet man named Robert who treated her like a queen. They had 2 sons who were bright and curious like their mother. Samuel, surprisingly, settled down when he was 25, marrying an Apache woman named Morning Star who he had met on one of his expeditions. The marriage raised some eyebrows in town, but Beatrice and Jackson welcomed their daughter-in-law with open arms, seeing the love and respect between her and their son. Morning Star was a skilled herbalist and healer, and she taught Beatrice many remedies from her people that proved invaluable on the ranch. James and Elizabeth had 4 more children after little Beatrice, making the Lawson family large and boisterous. Family gatherings at the ranch were noisy affairs, with children running everywhere and laughter echoing off the mountains. Mrs. Henderson passed away peacefully in her sleep at the age of 72, and Beatrice grieved for the woman who had been such a good friend and had helped guide her through those early uncertain days. They buried her next to her husband in the small cemetery outside St. Louis, and Beatrice made sure fresh flowers were placed on her grave every week. As Beatrice and Jackson entered their 50s, they began to think about the future of the ranch. James had his own spread now, built with money he had earned training horses. Grace and her family lived in town, but Samuel and Morning Star had built a cabin on the far edge of the Lawson property, and Samuel had expressed interest in taking over the ranch eventually. What do you think? Jackson asked Beatrice one evening as they sat on their porch, watching the sunset. It had become their ritual, these quiet moments at the end of the day when they could be together and reflect on their life. I think Samuel would be a good choice, Beatrice said. He loves this land the way you do. And Morning Star has already made such a difference here with her knowledge of plants and healing. They would take care of it. Then it is settled, Jackson said. We will talk to him tomorrow, make it official. We will not stop working, of course. This ranch is in my blood. But it will be good to know that, when we are gone, it will stay in the family. The conversation with Samuel went well. He was honored and excited at the prospect of eventually inheriting the ranch, and Morning Star was already making plans for expanding the garden and possibly raising sheep as well as cattle. On their 30th anniversary, all of the Lawson children and grandchildren gathered at the ranch for a celebration. There were now 9 grandchildren in total, ranging from baby Peter, James and Elizabeth's youngest, to 13-year-old Beatrice, their oldest. As Beatrice looked around at the crowded house, at the family she and Jackson had created, she felt overwhelmed with gratitude. 30 years ago, she had been a lonely woman in Boston, facing an uncertain future. The mail-order bride agency had seemed like a desperate gamble, and when she had been delivered to the wrong ranch, she had thought it was a disaster. But it had been the opposite of a disaster. It had been destiny. Jackson found her in the kitchen, taking a moment away from the chaos. He wrapped his arms around her from behind, resting his chin on her shoulder. "Happy anniversary, my love," he murmured. "Happy anniversary," she replied, turning in his arms to face him. "Thank you for 30 wonderful years." "Thank you for saying yes when I told you that you were mine," he countered. "For taking a chance on a cowboy who fell in love with you at first sight." "Best decision I ever made," Beatrice said, kissing him softly. "Though I think technically you took a chance on me. I was the one who was supposed to marry someone else, remember? How could I forget? Poor McCready. I should probably feel bad about stealing his bride." "You did not steal me. I chose you freely and willingly, and I would choose you again every single day." They rejoined the celebration, cutting the cake that Grace had made and accepting the well wishes of their children and grandchildren. Later, when everyone had finally settled down for the night, bedrolls spread throughout the house and the older boys camping outside, Beatrice and Jackson retreated to their bedroom. 30 more years?" Jackson asked as they lay in bed together, still fitting together perfectly after all this time. "At least," Beatrice promised, "though we will be quite ancient by then. I do not care if I am 90 as long as I have you beside me." "You will," she assured him, "always." The years that followed were gentler, quieter. Jackson and Beatrice gradually handed over more of the ranch operations to Samuel and Morning Star, though Jackson still insisted on checking the cattle most mornings, and Beatrice still kept a hand in managing the accounts. They traveled a bit, taking the train to see Grace and her family in town more often, visiting James and Elizabeth at their ranch. They spoiled their grandchildren shamelessly, and the children loved visiting the ranch where their fathers or mothers had grown up. When Beatrice turned 60, Jackson threw her a surprise party. The whole family came, along with what seemed like half the territory. There were speeches and toasts, and Beatrice laughed and cried in equal measure. "You have had quite a life," Sarah Porter said to her as they sat together on the porch, watching the festivities. Sarah was in her late 60s now, a widow since her husband had passed 5 years prior. From Boston to Montana, from a mail-order bride to the matriarch of one of the most respected families in the territory. "I never imagined any of this when I was a frightened girl stepping off that wagon," Beatrice admitted. "I thought I was going to one ranch, ended up at another, and found everything I had ever wanted." "Jackson is a good man. You were lucky." "We were both lucky," Beatrice corrected. "I gave him as much as he gave me. We built this life together." As the party wound down and guests began to depart, Beatrice found herself alone on the porch with Jackson. The stars were coming out, brilliant and countless in the vast Montana sky. "You ever wonder what happened to Samuel McCready?" Jackson asked suddenly. Beatrice laughed. "After all these years, that is what you are thinking about. Just curious. We heard he eventually married, but I never learned anything more than that." "I hope he found happiness," Beatrice said sincerely. I hope he learned to be honest with whoever he married, and that they built a good life together. Generous of you, considering he lied to you. His lies brought me to you, Beatrice pointed out. So in a strange way, I suppose I should thank him. If he had been honest, I might have looked at his profile and decided he was too old for me. I might have chosen someone else from the agency, ended up on a different ranch in a different territory. Fate, Jackson said. We were meant to find each other. Yes, Beatrice agreed, taking his hand. We were. They sat in comfortable silence, fingers intertwined, watching the stars wheel slowly overhead. After all these years, they could still find peace in simply being together, needing no words to express the depth of their love and commitment. Time continued its relentless march. Jackson and Beatrice reached their 40th anniversary, then their 45th. They grew old together, their hair turning white, their movements slower, but their love never diminishing. If anything, it deepened, tempered and strengthened by decades of facing life's challenges side by side. Their children continued to thrive. James became known throughout Montana for his skill with horses, and his ranch prospered. Grace's oldest son went to college and became a lawyer, making his grandparents incredibly proud. Samuel and Morning Star expanded the ranch, adding sheep to the cattle operation just as Morning Star had wanted, and the diversification proved profitable. The grandchildren began to have children of their own, making Beatrice and Jackson great-grandparents. Little Beatrice, now a married woman of 30 with children of her own, brought her daughters to visit the ranch where her grandmother had first arrived as a confused mail-order bride so many years ago. Tell me the story again, grandmother, young Sarah, little Beatrice's oldest daughter, begged. About how you came to the wrong ranch. Beatrice, now in her 70s but still sharp as ever, smiled and pulled the girl onto her lap. Well, it was a hot August day in 1884, and I had been traveling for 6 weeks from Boston. She told the story as she had told it countless times before, watching Jackson's face as she spoke. He always smiled at the same parts, always squeezed her hand when she got to the part where he had said she was his now. It sounds like a fairy tale, Sarah said dreamily when the story ended. It does not it? Beatrice agreed. But it was real. Your great-grandfather and I built this life together, starting from that one fortunate mistake. Best mistake ever made, Jackson said, just as he always did. When they reached their 50th anniversary, the celebration was enormous. All of their children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren gathered at the ranch. The governor of Montana even sent a letter of congratulations, acknowledging the Lawson family's contributions to the state over the decades. Beatrice wore a new dress for the occasion, a beautiful blue silk that Grace and Morning Star had conspired to have made for her. Jackson wore a proper suit, grumbling about the tie but wearing it anyway because he knew it would make Beatrice happy. They renewed their vows in a simple ceremony performed by the same circuit preacher who had married them half a century before, now himself an old man. Their children stood witness, and there was not a dry eye in the house as Jackson and Beatrice pledged their love once more. 50 years ago, you were delivered to the wrong ranch, Jackson said, his voice wavering with emotion. But it turned out to be exactly the right place. You became mine that day, Beatrice Grant Lawson, and I became yours. And I thank God every single day for that mistake, for bringing you into my life, for giving me the gift of loving you. I love you, Beatrice said, tears streaming down her wrinkled cheeks. I have loved you every day of these 50 years, and I will love you for whatever time we have left and beyond. They kissed, and their family applauded, and Beatrice felt the same flutter in her heart that she had felt on their wedding day all those years ago. The party continued late into the night, with music and dancing and storytelling. Beatrice sat in her chair on the porch, Jackson beside her, watching their family celebrate. This was her legacy, she thought. Not just the ranch or the land, but the love that had started it all. The love that had grown and multiplied, spreading through generations. "What are you thinking about?" Jackson asked softly. "Everything," Beatrice said. "Nothing. How blessed I am, how grateful I am for that wagon driver's mistake. We should have tracked him down and thanked him," Jackson joked. "I tried, actually, years ago," Beatrice admitted. "I wanted to write him a letter, tell him how his error had changed my life for the better. But the stage company had no record of who drove that route that day. He is lost to history." "Then let us thank him now," Jackson said, raising his glass toward the stars. "To the unknown wagon driver who delivered Beatrice to the wrong ranch. May he be at peace, wherever he is, knowing that his mistake led to 50 years of happiness." "To the wagon driver," Beatrice echoed, touching her glass to Jackson's. They sat together as the celebration went on around them, two old people who had loved each other well and truly for half a century. Their hands were clasped between them, fingers intertwined, and Beatrice thought there was no better way to end a perfect day. The seasons turned, and the years continued to pass. Jackson's health began to decline when he was in his late 70s. Nothing serious at first, just the inevitable wearing down of a body that had worked hard for so many decades. He moved slower, tired more easily. But his mind remained sharp, and his love for Beatrice never wavered. On a cold winter morning, just a few months after their 55th anniversary, Jackson did not wake up. Beatrice woke beside him as she had for more than half a century, and when she turned to kiss him good morning, she found him still and peaceful, gone in his sleep. The grief nearly destroyed her. For 55 years, Jackson had been her partner, her love, her life. Suddenly, that bright presence was gone, leaving a hole that could never be filled. The family gathered around her, offering comfort and support, but Beatrice felt utterly lost. Samuel and Morning Star convinced her to stay at the ranch, in the house she and Jackson had made into a home. "This is where you belong, Mother," Samuel said gently. "This is where Father would want you to be." So Beatrice stayed, finding solace in the familiar rhythms of ranch life. She helped Morning Star in the garden, told stories to her great-great-grandchildren, and every evening at sunset, she would sit on the porch in her rocking chair, Jackson's empty chair beside her. "I miss you," she would say to the empty air. "Every moment of every day I miss you." But she also felt his presence still. In the house they had built together, in the land they had worked, in the family they had created. Jackson was gone, but the love they had shared lived on in every corner of the ranch, in every child and grandchild and great-grandchild who carried their legacy forward. 6 months after Jackson's death, Beatrice sat down and wrote out the entire story of her life, from that hot August day when she had arrived at the wrong ranch to the present. She wrote about Jackson, about their love, about the family they had built. She wrote so that future generations would know the story, would understand that sometimes the wrong turn leads to the right destination. She gave copies to all her children, and they read it with tears and laughter, remembering the man they had loved and lost, celebrating the love story that had made their lives possible. Beatrice lived for 2 more years after Jackson's death, content in the knowledge that she had lived a full and happy life. She saw 2 more great-great-grandchildren born, bounced them on her knee, and told them the story of the wrong ranch and the right cowboy. On a beautiful summer evening, she sat on the porch watching the sunset. The sky was painted in shades of orange and pink, exactly like it had been on her wedding night so many decades ago. She felt a sense of peace wash over her, and for just a moment she could have sworn she felt Jackson's hand in hers. "There you are," she whispered. "I have been waiting for you." They found her the next morning, still in her rocking chair, a smile on her face. She had died as Jackson had, peacefully in her sleep, with no pain or fear. The family buried her beside Jackson in the small cemetery outside St. Louis, Montana. The whole territory turned out for the funeral, testament to the impact Beatrice Lawson had made during her long life. The preacher spoke of her kindness, her strength, her devotion to family. But it was little Sarah, now a grown woman with children of her own, who gave the most touching eulogy. She stood beside the grave and told the story one more time, the story Beatrice had told so many times before. "My great-great-grandmother came to Montana looking for a new life," Sarah said. "She was sent to the wrong ranch, but she found the right man. Jackson Lawson looked at her and said, 'Looks like you are mine now,' and she was, for 55 beautiful years. They built a life together, a family together, a legacy that continues today. We are all here because a wagon driver made a mistake and a cowboy fell in love. We are all here because of Beatrice and Jackson's love." The Lawson family continued to thrive on the ranch for generations to come. The story of how Beatrice came to the wrong ranch became family legend, told and retold at every gathering. Young girls dreamed of finding a love like theirs, and young men aspired to be the kind of husband Jackson had been. The ranch itself stood as a monument to their love. Samuel and Morning Star worked it for many more years before passing it to their son. That son passed it to his daughter, who passed it to her son. And on it went, generation after generation, the land that had witnessed the beginning of such a beautiful love story continuing to sustain the family that love had created. In the family Bible, carefully preserved and passed down, was an entry in Beatrice's elegant hand on the page where her marriage to Jackson was recorded. It reads simply, "Delivered to the wrong ranch, found the right home, found my heart, found everything." And in the cemetery outside St. Louis, Montana, 2 headstones stood side by side. Jackson Lawson, beloved husband, father, grandfather, and rancher. Beatrice Grant Lawson, beloved wife, mother, grandmother, and heart of the ranch. Beneath both names, carved into the stone, was a single phrase that summed up their entire story. "Together always, as we were meant to be." The wind blew across the Montana plains, carrying with it the scent of wildflowers from the high meadow where Jackson had first kissed Beatrice all those years ago. The ranch continued its work. Cattle grazed on the hills, and in the house, a new generation of Lawsons sat on the porch watching the sunset, telling stories of the past and dreaming of the future. The love story that had begun with a mistake and a cowboy's bold claim had become something eternal, woven into the very fabric of the land and the family it had created. Beatrice and Jackson were gone, but their love lived on, as true and strong as it had ever been, a testament to the power of choosing love, of taking chances, and of trusting that sometimes the wrong turn leads us exactly where we are meant to be.